So I'm gonna try to quickly explain tank testing. There's a few ways to test tanks. And again, this is just my opinion. The best way to test a tank, if you're gonna, it's called the Horner Easy 3 with locator. A gentleman named Brad Estabrook invented it. I know Brad very well. I used to test tanks. So what you do is you measure the amount of oil that's in this tank. You check it for water. The weight of water is 0.031. Excuse me, oil is 0.31. Water is 0.036. You take that measurement with the diameter, you put it into a formula. It tells you how much vacuum to apply. Now the reason, and then you go 10% over. The reason why you're doing that is because if there's holes along the bottom, you want to apply enough vacuum to pull air in up through the bottom, because you're doing this to try to determine if there are holes in the tank, which is possibly an environmental impact. So, and again, this test system, it says right on the test results, it's only 95% correct of the time. And it also says in your test results that this test is only good for the day it was tested. In other words, if you test the tank and then a week later there's a problem and the testing company is wrong, they're not liable, because it's you didn't determine this the day it was done. Craig used to test tanks also for how many years?
Like 6, 7?
6 or 7 years. So, and the reason why I got out of it is because I was wrong a lot of the times for different reasons. So when you test a tank, you don't just test the vessel itself. You test all the associated piping and all the fitting. So here is that vent pipe right here that went down into the top of the tank. Right there you see the threads and how it's broken. So there's no dope on that, and there's no plumbing thread. So when you apply a vacuum, you're testing that fitting. You're testing the fitting on the fill. You're testing the plug. And you're actually testing the return and suction lines. And you can see there's no plumbing tape on that. So a lot of these tanks will fail, and it'll fail based on a leak above the liquid level. So that vent pipe is a non-product bearing line. In other words, no oil goes through that. So 30 years ago when the plumber installed this, he's not going to dope up that fitting or use a plumber's tape on it, because there's no oil going through it. There's no reason to do it. It's the same thing with these other, but then 30 years later, you're going to pull a vacuum on this to try to determine the tightness. So a lot of the times it's wrong. And that was the case with this property or this tank. It failed a tightness test above the liquid level. So we're going to cut this tank open and determine if there were any holes in the bottom of it. I don't do a lot of takes when I do these YouTube videos, and that may have been a little confusing. So if it was, feel free to comment, and then I'll try to explain it. But for me, if the tank is more than 15 years old, it's reached its life expectancy, pull it out. Testing a tank prior to buying a home, I've said this many a times, it's like giving your horse a physical right before you shoot it. You're better off putting the money for this tank test towards the actual tank removal. If the homeowner says that he doesn't want to do the tank test, they try to split the cost with him. Say, well, I'll pay for the removal of the underground tank, and you pay for the installation, or vice versa. The homeowner, the existing homeowner may not be responsible for the new tank, but in my opinion, he's responsible for the underground tank. And a lot of these companies, not all, if it fails a tank test, they call it into the state as a leaker. So now your property has a DEC spill number that you've got to close out. And that gets costly. Now you got to find an environmental company that's going to procure analysis after the tank's removed, and then write a full closure report, and you'll sometime wait months for that spill number to get closed, which will affect the closing. So, as I always say, underground tank, more than 15 years, pull it out. It's reached its life expectancy. So we're going to clean this up a little bit better. We're going to cut our access hole and start to transfer our fuel.